We're looking at Chapter 12, Conversion Wages for Lump Sum Conversion to UAN, on page 66 in the Payroll Training Manual. A conversion wage is the method of posting in one lump sum the year-to-date data for each person from your current payroll system, whether it's paper ledgers, software, or an outsourced vendor, into the UAN software for the purpose of issuing a W-2 from one system and having correct year-to-date data on the employee's pay stub. Conversion wages posted in payroll have no effect on the fund cash balance and will not generate any unpaid withholdings. Please read all of the sections in Chapter 12 beginning on page 66, 67, and 68 to understand what decisions you would have to make prior to beginning your conversion wages. Let me show you a couple of items to give you something to think about. Bob is going to pull up for us a sample pay period. In our Fake Township, we're following this sample pay period for our biweekly and our monthly paid employees and elected officials. Notice that I've highlighted in color the yellow color for those pay period end dates, then highlighted also what month that would appear on the OPRS or OP&F reports. The pay period end date determines what report for OPRS and OPF the wages will report on. Notice that the December 8th through 21st pay period was paid by a check dated January 4th. This creates a different month for tax liability. Taxes are based on check date. The IRS, state, local taxes, and withholdings are not based on pay periods. Only OPRS and OPF look at the dates earned and pay periods. So one date will give us a January tax liability with the check, and the other date will give us a December retirement report. And at the beginning of at the beginning of each year, I always created a sample biweekly pay period schedule so I would know ahead of time which months I had to wait to create the monthly report until the next month's wages were posted on the check. Notice in the monthly pay period schedule that my trustees and myself are paid on the first month meeting. So on January 7th, I was paid for the pay period beginning December 1st through 31st. Some of you follow those same pay periods, and others will follow a different pay period. You should never be paid in advance, so you should be getting a check dated after the pay period ends. And I know some of you will look at that and say, well, we get paid for the whole month at the first meeting. You probably should reconsider that. So notice that the check date, January 7th, places the very first paycheck in January on the January tax liability month, but because the pay period was December 1st through 31st, it'll be on the December OPRS report. Okay? So you have to understand these things before you start your conversion wages. So I'd like you to think about that, read the information on the first pages of the conversion wage. Let's also take a look at a sample payroll ledger for our fiscal officer, Brutus Buckeye. Now your payroll ledgers are probably going to look something like this. You'll probably show the pay period, the check dates, the gross salary, all the taxes that have been withheld, and Bob, if you'll scroll over to the right, they can see the employer's share of Medicare and OPRS and the net paycheck. Your payroll ledgers probably already contain this information. You probably are totaling them at the end of each month and at the end of each quarter. So if you scroll back to the right, notice that you can see the total conversion wage data for this example because we're going live in our payroll training land April 1st. We would see that all the wages paid in January, February, and March are for the tax liability year for January, February, and March. Doesn't matter what the pay period is, we enter all the check dates that will be included on the W-2 in this year. So the amount that I'm entering on the conversion wage is going to be the total year-to-date data of each item. the total wages, the total of each withholding, and the total for Medicare and OPERS for Brutus. And your payroll ledger should already contain this information. Okay, Bob, if you'll go ahead and move that out of the way. We'll do a sample conversion wage. So we're going to go to payroll, transactions, and wages. And click the Add button to add a new conversion wage. Our exercise begins on page 68, and the conversion wage detail that we'll be entering is on page 69. When you click the Add form, we're going to choose Conversion. Remember, this type does not hit the cash journal. It does not reduce our fund balance in any way. And we're always going to receive the message to remember to post the correct pay periods. We'll click OK. And I would recommend that you do the conversion wages one at a time rather than by groups. So we're going to choose the administration department and the monthly frequency. And for the conversion wage, the frequency is going to contain the very beginning pay period and the very end pay period. So from our sample pay period in Ledger, we had the start date of December 1st, 2012. And the end date will be 2/28/2013. Select Brutus. We're also going to get this handy little message where the software is telling us that the length of the pay period we entered does not match the standard length of a pay period for the monthly frequency. Well, in this instance, we know that December through February is not a month, but our conversion wage is going to contain the whole parameters of what we're posting in the ledger. Go ahead and click OK to that message. You shouldn't be alarmed by that for conversion wage purposes. We're going to go ahead and select only Brutus Buckeye. We're going to do these one at a time. And we click Save. The software shows in the lower left corner that it saved one wage, and we can click Close. And yes, we would like to add or edit the wage record. The Edit Wage form is going to open, and the very first thing you're going to enter is, notice in the wage area there is a box for manual net. This is your safety net. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at our payroll manual, and our total for the net paychecks all year long is $5,349.99. And we're going to enter that in the manual net box. Now the software will not let us save or post the conversion wage until we enter the correct wage and withholding information to reach that target manual net. So that's our safety net. We start entering the total wages. Now Brutus is a very easy person. He's got a salary with one account code, and if we look at the payroll ledger on page 69, it shows his salary for the year has totaled $7,044. And I'm going to look at my gross wages and see $7,044 is now correct, and click on the Withholdings tab. And I'm going to enter the employer share of Medicare. I have to click plus to expand to the detail. And on the salary account line, I'm going to enter $102.15. And I'll expand the OPERS employer share to the salary detail, and on that account the employer share total is $986.16. I can verify in my wage area that the employer total withholding is $1,088.31. It matches my payroll ledger. Now we can enter the employee withholdings. The state tax was $155.28. You're going to be taking this total right from your payroll ledger. $186.48, $102.15, $704.40, $70.44, $12.45, and $462.81. You want to look at that carefully. Make sure you've entered the correct amount for each item in the proper line. Notice now that we can check our withholdings amount against our ledger. the net paycheck is correct, the withholdings are correct, and the gross amount is correct. Before you post, it's highly recommended that you print the batch wage report and check off each item again to verify that you've entered them correctly. To have data for the batch wage report, you would first click Save. And note, we're going to get this message that we have modified more than one employee rate. And we know that. We changed it to match the whole parameters of all the pay periods posted this year. So we don't need to make a change in payroll maintenance employees. It's just a system message giving us a heads up in case. So you can minimize this form, go to Payroll Reports and Statements, Batch Reports Wages, and from the drop-down list, I like the batch wage detail for this purpose. Select the employee, and I recommend you print that report. Review carefully, comparing them to your ledgers, that you have the correct gross wages and all of the taxes entered correctly on the proper lines. You don't want to mix up health insurance with dental insurance or OPRs with Buckeye Village income tax. Make sure each and every item is posted correctly. So if this is correct, you can close the form, close the batch wage reports, bring your conversion wage back up to the foreground, and go ahead and click Post. When you post the item, the software is going to request a post date. Now what I'd like you to remember about post dates is for conversion wage purposes, you can and you should backdate. So let's take, for example, in our Fake Township, it's April 3rd, and I'm starting live wages April 1st. I don't want any of the conversion wages to pull into April, because they would then appear on my 941, my OPRS report. Some of the things would post in, not the OPRS report, it's the pay period, but some of the items would post in to the tax reports, and we don't want them there. So for the posting date for the conversion wage, for my purposes, I want them in March so they won't corrupt anything in my next quarter. Bob is going to go ahead and change the month to March, and he's chosen the 31st. So I don't want the conversion wage to pull into my live payroll data, and that's the date I'm going to choose for conversion wages. Click OK, and the software is going to print a payroll conversion voucher. We're going to send that off to our fake printer. In your entity, you're going to load plain paper and click Print. We've got to get our fake printer message out of your way. You'll get the message, did all items print successfully? Click Yes, and the conversion wage goes away. So you would want to compare those to your ledger, making sure that your year-to-date and all your amounts are correct. If they are correct, you are ready to move forward. A conversion wage doesn't have to be posted prior to beginning wages on the UAN software. You can set up your employees and start posting live wages, and then as you move forward, you could start doing conversion wages one employee at a time. Be sure and post those conversion wages before your live data starts so they don't pull into any of the reports for the month or quarter that you're posting live. Once you post the conversion data, then your employee year-to-date information will be updated on their stub. Okay, we showed you Brutus, who was a very simple conversion wage. He's paid from one account code and he only had one salary. It was fairly simple. Remember that the purpose of the conversion wage is to bring the payroll data, the gross and net and all the taxes in, so that the software at the end of the year will print one W-2. You're not required to do a conversion wage. You can choose to, at the end of the year, combine the UAN posted wages with the ledger that you have and do your W-2s separate and apart from the software, as you've been doing for years. You've been generating W-2s outside of the UAN software before, and you can do that again this year. Once you have a full year in the software, you'll be able to print W-2s very simply. Remember that the conversion wage is up to you to choose. And it can be done very simply by looking at your payroll ledgers for those easily posted salary employees. When it gets to the more complicated employees that have multiple account codes, your ledgers don't contain that account code the account code detail that you need. So when we take our employee Steve Friendly, for example, Bob's going to pull up the sample ledgers, and notice we have Brutus Buckeye. He just had a salary and all of his withholdings. And we're going to scroll down to Steve Friendly, and notice it's a lot more complicated. Steve is paid bi-weekly. We can see the pay periods and the check dates. He has regular hours, overtime hours, and all those different leaves. Scroll to the right for us, Bob. Notice that we also have vacation leave accrual and sick leave accrual. And if you look in your book on page 70 and 71, we've transferred the data that you see on the screen into 2 pages for the conversion wages. Now notice this page for Steve Friendly on the screen only contains his earnings, and when you scroll down to the next screen, we would see all of the withholdings that have come out of his check, and also the employer's shares and the final net paycheck. So you see these same 2 things on page 70 and 71. But notice that I still have to have the same items that I had for Brutus, who was a much simpler. I have to have the total wages, and then I have to have the total of each of the withholdings to enter in the software as a conversion wage. Let's take a look at the conversion wage for Steve, and I know that this is going to be very complicated. We'll go ahead and click Add and Conversion. We'll remember to post the correct pay periods for our conversion wages. And Steve is a member of the maintenance department, and he's a bi-weekly employee. So the start date for all of his conversion wages will be December 8th, 2012. And then the end date of the last wage posted from our other payroll ledger is March 15th, 2013. And when we click to continue, we get the notice that the length of pay period does not match the standard length of pay for this frequency. Well, we can see that this is not one pay period, and that's what the conversion wage is doing, posting in the whole data from all the pay periods paid this year. We're going to select only Steve Friendly. We recommend that you do these one at a time and click Save. The software saved one wage. We can click Close and Yes to edit the wage form. Okay, now notice this is going to be a lot more complicated because Steve is paid hourly wages, manual split between account codes. He also has comp time, holiday leave, and sick leave, and vacation leave. The very first thing you're going to want to do is enter the manual net wage so that you don't post until you meet the correct target from your payroll ledger, $6,213.95. Okay, at the top of page 70, you can see that Steve Friendly had leave accruals during the pay periods that we've grouped together in the conversion wage. And that's why I told you when you're adding the employee through the Add Employee Wizard, you'd have to know what you're doing with conversion wages before you put in a beginning balance. So what I entered in the Add Employee Wizard was his January 1st beginning balance from the last pay period posted in December. And I'm now going to post a conversion wage starting from January 1st wages all the way through March. So it's going to include all of those leave balances earned and paid. So the first thing I'm going to do is enter the total leave accruals. He has earned 32 hours of holiday leave, 21.7 hours of sick, and 21.7 hours of vacation. And that is according to our fake policies. Those have been calculated by the number of pay periods he was paid and the number of holidays that have passed. Now let's take a look at hourly wages. Notice that you're not going to want to expand the detail for everything at once, so let's just click plus to the hourly wages. Notice in the book it shows you the hourly breakdown for each account code, totaling 492 hours. I doubt if your ledgers contain the account code detail for every hour they've worked. And remember that a conversion wage, the point of a conversion wage is not to post the account code detail, but to get the total amount of hours paid in the conversion wage, so it brings the year-to-date amount to the employee's paycheck and brings the total wages and withholdings to the W-2. So we don't have to post the account code detail. I can choose one of the accounts and enter all of the numbers. So notice on the 1,121.90 line, I'm going to go ahead and post the 492 hours, giving me a total gross pay for regular hours. Collapse the detail for hourly wages by clicking the minus sign, and then expand the detail for overtime wages. He had 16 total overtime wages during the span of time of the conversion wage. Collapse the detail for overtime wages, and I don't have to expand the detail for comp time because it's percent split. I can let the software split. He had 8 hours of comp time paid, 32 hours of holiday leave paid, 20 hours of sick leave paid, and the last is 8 hours of vacation leave paid. So what I'm looking for is to get the total gross wage at the correct rates of pay. You would never want to do a conversion wage and just stick 1 in the regular wages for all gross wages and set the rate at the total rate, because on that employee's pay stub where he has overtime wages year to date, the numbers wouldn't be correct. So you do want to get them in the correct type of payment with the correct amount, but you don't need the account code detail. So notice that on our ledger it shows the total gross wages paid is $8,760. So when my ledger and my screen match, I can move on to the next step. Let's go to the withholdings tab. The withholdings tab is the employer shares at a much higher detail, and remember, we do not have to post the account code detail on the conversion wage. So when you're looking at page 71, we can see that the Medicare employer share total is $127.02. So we expand the detail and look how that's done. It has Medicare employer share for all of the categories of his earnings and leave. We don't need to post that detail because this is all the same amount. It's not the same as the postings of the earnings. So I can click on the hourly wages and on the very first account enter the entire $127.02 as the Medicare employer share. And then I can collapse the detail for the Medicare employer share, expand the detail for OPERS and hourly wages, and then enter the $1,226.40 as the total employer share of OPERS. And collapse the detail. Notice my employer share in the wage area shows $1,353.42, and that matches my ledger for the employer share I've paid for this person. We move on to the employees' withholdings, and they are very easy to enter. You don't enter those at the account detail. 205.46, 407.78, 127.02, $876, $70, $140, $87.62, $350, $19.67, and $262.50. These are all coming from your current payroll ledgers. Notice my withholdings total is $2,546.05. That matches my ledger on page 71, and now my net check matches $6,213.95. Now you still could have typed something into the wrong area, so I'm going to recommend that you click Save. You can minimize the form and then go to Payroll Reports, Batch Reports Wages, select the batch wage detail, Steve Friendly, and I would recommend that you print that and carefully compare each item. Remember that we're not looking for account code detail. We're looking for the total number of hours that will pull in year to date to the employee's pay stub and the exact amounts of the earnings and the withholdings. You also want to make sure that the leave balance was correct, the amount earned and the amount used or paid during that time period. Once you are sure that your conversion wage matches your ledger, you would close the batch wage report and bring that edit wage form back up to the screen. Now we didn't mention this before, but obviously you cannot post a conversion wage from the batch list. You always have to be inside the edit wage form, and notice that edit wage forms. So let's have Bob show you that. Go ahead and close that, Bob. So let's say you started it, you saved it, you closed it. In order to post, we would mark it and we would click Edit. We can't post print from the batch list. So it's a conversion wage. It must be posted right here from the form. We would click Post. Remember, our post date needs to be backdated so that the conversion wage data does not interfere with the reporting of our live wages that are being posted right now. So we're going to backdate this to March 31st and then click OK. The software will show you that it's posting one payroll conversion voucher, and to load plain paper, click Print. We close that fake printer message. You won't receive that, and yes, the item's printed successfully. And they're gone from the batch. Let's discuss utilities. If you post the wage, the conversion wage, and you find that it was not correct, you can go to Payroll and Utilities, and Payroll Payment Utility, mark the item, and void. So even if you posted a conversion wage and you checked it carefully but you still made a mistake, you want to void it and use the same date as the posting date for the void date, so that it doesn't get into your current software postings. You're always going to get the system message, even when you're voiding a conversion wage. Important, if you use this wage in your 941 or ODJFS or OPERS and OPF reports, now that you voided the conversion wage, you might have to recreate those reports. Well, think about it. We backdated the conversion wage so it wouldn't interfere. So this is just a warning message. It doesn't mean that it's interfering with our current data. We can click OK. So you still can void those items once they've been posted. But we want you to be very careful, look at the screens carefully, and remember that the whole point of a conversion wage is not to do account code detail, but to get the correct gross wages under hourly and overtime, and if you're going to include the leave data, the correct earnings and the correct paid leave before you post. Remember to read the introduction section and understand fully the pay periods and check dates that you would need to include in the conversion wage, and give us a call on the support line if you have any questions. And remember again that conversion wages are fully optional. You do not have to do them. It's a convenience for you if you want the software to do your W-2s at the end of the year.